1, 2, 3.
All right. Welcome to the podcast, everyone. We're going to jump straight into it. I've got a guest this week. You know, I went on a 2-month hiatus with no guests. And so only found very, very small amount of people to break that fast with. So you've probably heard of this company. If you haven't, you've been hiding under a rock. They're the largest seller in the world, Pattern. And I have a repeat guest, Rob Hahn, who is the COO of Pattern. Welcome, Rob.
Thank you for having me back. I feel like twice, like get the double dip.
Oh, I'm just trying to get a good intro and go faster. I find myself just just getting gummed up because we were just chatting right before, and it was great. It got me excited. I was like, we got to hit the record button now because this is too much fun because we're nerding out. I'm actually speaking at the conference that Pattern is putting together, fourth time's a charm. I think this is the fourth time you've done it. And maybe I'm speaking there just because I'm a local and I've just been there every time. But it's great. It's Salt Lake City. It's May, which is actually my favorite month in Utah. Nice. Number one, because it's just summer comes around, the mountains are green. They're green for 1 month from the valley views. So, and Accelerate has a history. I've been to everyone, and the speakers that attend every single time, I'm like, wow, that's interesting. They got, this person. And you were nerding out about Ken Jennings.
Yeah, I think Ken Jennings is probably my celebrity crush in general, just across. I don't really care who else. I'm not a big oh my gosh, that celebrity's over there kind of fan. But Ken, and I got an opportunity. Our team allowed. First of all, he was great. If you were there last year, yeah, he was awesome. He's so personable. He's so
I'm a Ken
smart.
Jennings fan, and I learned more about his backstory than I didn't know that he lived in South Korea for a little while.
It was just he's such a human being, and he's so incredibly intelligent. I find him very interesting. But I actually got an opportunity to spend 15 minutes with him backstage, which is he signed a shirt. I put on, my team gave me a shirt of his face all over it, actually, which is just a funny thing. And he signed it on my body, and we got to hang out. And then he actually invited me to come to a live taping of Jeopardy in California. Okay. I got to go do that. I got to go backstage, hang out with him. It was it was honestly one of the coolest experiences of my life to go be able to do that. So yeah, we've actually, I'm continue to be surprised. Our team has done a great job of finding people that are not in the e-commerce world, but are interesting to listen to.
One that actually kind of is this one that's more relevant to a brand or a seller was actually Jesse Itzler. Did you see his?
Yeah, honestly, maybe the best speaker I've ever heard in my life. It was incredible.
I felt the same. I messaged 2 people from Pattern. I was like, you got to make this speech public. Do you have a recording? I got to see this again.
It was
unfortunately, I think they usually they lock that stuff down because I've heard Jesse on other podcasts and super inspirational, but what he did and the way he presented, just hits you out of left field.
It was nuts.
Talking about some of his business exploits, but then tying it in with his family arc and about his dad, they talk about playing checkers, and by the end, I know there were some tears in the audience. He was so good.
Yeah. Honestly, I felt I was both about to cry, and also I wanted to run through a wall. I felt like I could break glass in that moment with my hands. It was it was a great. He was amazing.
I bought his calendar. That he sells us this 1 year long calendar, and we got a spot in our house. I'm putting it right here. I want to schedule the whole year because he's very and this is very relevant for me now that I'm tied down with kids. If I'm going to have any sort of adventures, I've got to plan it. I've got to make it count.
Yeah.
I get
it's not just going to happen. Yeah.
Yeah. And so his calendar is all about just being very intentional about your monthly adventure or so forth. And so I'm, but his speech at Accelerate was just it was just too good.
It was we actually have a giant calendar. We have an 8-foot calendar of it, right down the hall from me here at the office. It's just like
Oh,
all
really?
across the wall and like put up there. Yeah. So
Yeah.
we've
Well, is
absolutely
it
like
is it
adopted
his
it.
branded one? It's called like the
Yeah.
big ass calendar.
Big
Okay.
house calendar. Yeah.
Well,
It's like this
well,
giant thing sitting there on the wall. So
I bought a 2025. Honestly, like maybe I should buy another one for the office because like it'd just be fun. Um,
yeah.
I think I will. So wow, so far into the recording and we're just getting started. But we were talking about Accelerate. Uh, it's a conference that's going to surprise you if you've never been. A lot of brands they've done such a great job of getting brands to speak. Um, and I think like Liquid Death has spoken.
Yeah.
I'm saying like the ones that you've heard of. There's multiple,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. We've got a lot. I think what's cool about what I actually really like about it. I mean, I've been to lots of conferences, especially ones that put on by a company where you're like, all right, it's like a sales pitch basically. And what I've
sure,
really enjoyed is that we've done a good job of being like, let's just talk about tough problem. Like everybody's struggling with X, Y,
yeah,
or Z. Let's just talk about stuff. We actually don't care if it's our stuff or your stuff. Like, and so it's not an accident you're coming on. You've got, obviously a lot of people that listen to you and you've got unique perspective. So I think we're just chasing like what's interesting stuff that people want to
yeah,
learn about. And I think we've kept really quite good integrity. I'm excited about next year. We've already got a bunch
yeah.
of really cool speakers lined up. So I'm really
I'll
excited.
say I've tried my best to leave. There's like an Amazon ecosystem. I've tried my best to like leave and be like, okay, what's the general e-commerce ecosystem? And there's a lot of large brands, and I will actually say like Accelerate. I think it almost defaults towards the larger brands a little bit more than like just Amazon people. If
Yep.
you go to Prosper, especially like the earlier years, it was just Amazon,
Yeah.
and um, it's only branching out now as like Walmart and TikTok Shop are like showing up. But
Yeah.
what I'm saying is that the people that you're going to sit next to Accelerate tend to, there's absolutely just brands in attendance. And so, yeah, so super
Agreed.
exciting. We didn't even plan to talk about that. It just like came up
It's happened.
organically. But like what we're going to talk about, the reason I was like, okay, I got to break this fast. I got to get Rob on, as there's a lot of changes in the fulfillment networks on Amazon. And
Yep.
we're recording in December right now, but so it's kind of too late to make some big changes. But like, let's just like catch up people what's happened this year
Sure.
and what it actually means going forward.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot that's changed. I think the biggest thing, and stop me if I'm like getting on a roll here too much, but I think one of the main foundational pieces, Amazon added a bunch of fees this year, and people have really been focused on the extra costs and the extra charges. And I think Amazon really missed the mark on explaining what the benefits are of some of the underlying pieces, right? So like, and I'm not a fan of how Amazon laid this out. And I think the fees don't make a lot of sense in many ways. But I think Amazon had an opportunity to say, hey, if you do X, then Y can happen, and Y is actually a benefit for you and consumers and for us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so like I think of two of them to kind of point out, like a low inventory fee, for example. A low inventory fee, they're basically saying, hey, you need to have enough inventory because we want you to be able to ship it closer to a customer. And the placement fee is about getting your stuff closer to a consumer because there's a really easy path to being able to see conversion increases from 2-day to next day, and even more so within sub same day network, where I can order that and I can get it in 6 hours or whatever that is for many large population areas. That conversion lift is what Amazon's trying to chase. I think they missed the mark on communicating this in the way that made sense, and I don't love that they did it punitive instead of giving some
Mm-hmm.
type of benefit instead. I think they could have rolled it out differently, but the
Mm-hmm.
foundational underlying biggest piece of what Amazon leaned into in 2024
Yeah.
is placement. And
Yeah.
like placement has impacts well beyond just logistics, right? It goes across the entire business.
I've never thought about it the way you just talked about it. I'm generally an FBA apologist. Like people
Yeah.
get after it, I'm like you don't realize how great it is. And when the fees increases come around, I'm like, hey guys, it's not that big
There's
of
a
a deal.
reason.
If
Yeah.
this breaks your
Yep.
business, you didn't have a great business.
Yeah. Agreed.
But then when I started going through it and thinking about it this year, I was like, oh, this is why it's different. One is you get charged up front.
It's a
And it can
totally
be like,
different thing. Yeah.
a few $1,000s. That's not
Significant.
uncommon to get that in a shipment. And like when you do that, it just kind of like reworks the psychology of like, oh, this sucks. Um,
Yeah.
if it was $1,000 on the back end, people actually wouldn't notice as much. So
Very
if
different.
had they, based on what you said, had they increased the fees, but then made incentives after the fact, like, hey, if you
Pull it
achieve
down.
this, then we're actually going to reduce this fee. All of a sudden, like, you know, it creates this win-win scenario.
I think yeah, I think it is. I mean, people are accustomed to FBA rate increases, right? Like it's a thing that
Yeah.
they're used to seeing. I think that the I mean, kind of ironic thing, right? Like, well, I was at Amazon for 8 years, right? So like I
Mhm.
spent 5 of those years, five plus years of those in the inbound network. I spent a lot of time on inbound processes, and I've seen how Amazon's inbound network has shifted entirely over the past 10 years. I mean, it's like just foundationally different from what it was even 2 years ago, 3 years ago. But
Mhm.
the interesting thing is like people are used to one fee, and the complexity of like how do I as a
Yeah.
seller, I'm it's kind of leans toward honestly kind of the bigger, it makes it harder for smaller sellers to compete in many ways. I really do
Yeah.
believe that. Like I have an advantage.
Mm.
I've got a bunch of, we're the biggest seller. We've got human beings and algorithms and hundreds of tech people that are chasing down how to improve these things. Where, a standard seller is like, man, this is too complex. So I think the biggest thing that they missed the mark on was just they added so much complexity that it feels like a money grab instead of what it could be, and it's trying to optimize the business. And so I think that I just think the foundational underlying piece is they missed the mark on communicating what they're actually trying to do from the logistics
Mhm.
side is get things closer to the end consumer.
Yeah.
And this kind of came from, I talked about like Amazon's network. When I was there, you know, Amazon had a few cross docks. And so Amazon, when you send something into Amazon, right, it goes into a cross dock and then they send it to the fulfillment center. And that's where it actually ships to a customer, right? So where you're generally shipping it on a standard size item specifically, for sure, it's not going to the fulfillment center. It's going to go through a cross dock and then go to the actual site to store it and ship it. Well, the problem was Amazon's network got too big. Amazon had too many fulfillment centers. And so the cross docks you were sending to, they're not connected to all the metro areas basically in the US as they've
Mhm.
continued to grow. So what that means is you are not actually in stock locally in many of these large metro areas. And that means that you're going to hurt conversion. So Amazon said, I want to go solve that problem. I want more stuff. I want fewer of each thing, but more locations in order to get it
Mhm.
closer to a consumer where they are likely to buy it. And that is actually foundationally a good thing, right? Like that is not it's not the wrong thing. I don't blame Amazon for doing that. That is the right thing that you want because we see a lift on ad effectiveness. We see a lift on sales for faster speeds on Amazon. The Amazon consumer specifically wants that and is looking for that. So the underlying piece isn't wrong. I think they just rolled it out incorrectly
Yeah.
from a
Yeah.
placement perspective. And now there's
Well,
lasting effects of that.
yeah. Tell us specifically what like the new crossdock setup is.
Yeah, so this last year, I mean, they made tons of changes, not just to the fee structure, but really they changed their inbound crossdock, their inbound network across the board. So
Mhm.
they used to have a single tier crossdock network. You send to a crossdock, they send to a fulfillment center. But Amazon basically now has a two-tier crossdock system. They've got national crossdocks and they've got regional crossdocks. And they are kind of what you'd expect them to be, right? National would mean basically that you're going to send it there. They're going to split it into the regions. But now you get two touches instead of one prior to it
Mhm.
getting to a fulfillment center. So let's say that you don't pay the placement fee, right? Those that are familiar with this, probably many people are. If you, currently, this could change. Maybe it's 6, maybe it's 12 in the future. But if you can handle 5 splits, meaning I'm going to send it to 5 different regions, inbound regions in the United States, then I'm going to avoid paying a placement fee. If you do that, you're going to go directly into regional crossdocks and then to fulfillment centers in that region, right? Because what I said was they couldn't connect them all. But now all the regional crossdocks are connected to the fulfillment centers in their regions. The national crossdocks, it'll be an extra touch. You send it to a national crossdock and then to a regional crossdock and then to the FC. The only time
Yeah.
you'll do that is if you create a non-compliant shipment, which is basically defined as not 5 splits. So if you're splitting it 3 ways or you're just doing it 1 in a single shipment, you're going to add now touches and lead time to get it to the end consumer, right? So, and that won't change. So this year, things were tough for a few reasons.
And for seasonal stuff, that week matters.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I think we analyzed that. I mean, this was like a small analysis like years ago. Like, okay, in Q4, UPS was just a little bit faster to get received. So we're like, okay, we'll pay the additional cost of small parcel for like these 2 or 3 months because, you know, this stuff, as soon as it gets in, it sells. So, you have to factor like that. Then it kind of comes into like the cost of your capital, like, you know, so all these.
And the hard part was a lot of people this year were like, that's worked in the past. So like, should we do small parcel? And the problem is the small parcel is still going to a national cross dock.
Yeah.
A lot of times. So unless you're doing the split, so you're sending that small parcel to a national cross dock. Whereas before it would be like, okay, now it's closer, but it's still as in multiple days. So basically you're in a situation as a seller, you either do the 5-way split or you not only increase your cost, but you increase your lead time by many days, or in the worst time period during peak, it was even longer than that, right? They were saying like 10, 14 days if you send to a national for it to get an appointment at the national cross dock, get processed, get an appointment at the regional cross dock, get processed, get an appointment time at the fulfillment center, get brought in, sit in their backlog, get received, get stowed. Like I've done that thing. I know how long that lead time takes. And so that, you know, the dreaded FC transfer bucket that everyone stares at every single day until their seasonal stuff hits, that became a lot longer and a lot more challenging this year. So I think just to separate the two things, Amazon had a tough Q4 because they launched a lot of these cross docks very late in the year, in Q4, some of them, many of them in Q3, some in Q4. But the foundational network change isn't different moving forward. That will always now be true for the rest of time.
So,
well, I mean, unless I change it again, but like that is the 2-tier cross dock system is staying through 2025. It's no different.
So let's jump to like the so what. Obviously, you know, if you can split shipments, if you can handle that in a reasonable way, it's usually, and I've heard, you know, it often can come out more cost effective. But
many times,
you know, even then there still might be inefficiencies. Maybe you have the low inventory thing. My challenge that I'm actually like still working through right now, I haven't really solved it because I've got incentive to like solve this in some tools that I'm working on, is if you recognize that you are off balance on inventory and like some areas, you know, you have slower shipping speeds, some areas you have faster, like, can you do anything about that as a seller?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is the goodness that comes from the regional crossdock and the split and the placement. I think that's one of the things that you end up getting more consistently. If Amazon's algorithm is correct about placement or closer on placement, which you can throw stones at, there's definitely, it's not perfect. But if you are getting into the region, the effective idea is it's going to take me a few more days to get it to the right place. But once it gets there, it's going to be faster in, so I have better balance across the network. So it's not going to be perfect, but Amazon basically says, and I think they're right on this based on our data and based on what we're seeing, is that when you do the split correctly, you will get more consistent inventory in the large metro areas where you'll have less of a discrepancy between where your inventory is versus where your customers are. I think there's also one important thing, and that is people generally think that sending in a lot of inventory solves this problem, and it doesn't. So an interesting fact is that let's say that you've got expiration date items and you're sending in a bunch of expiration date items. You need 1,000 units in order to stay across and stay in stock across the US. You're like, I don't know how long it's going to take. I'm going to send in 4,000 instead. Well, Amazon, their placement algorithm is not going to say, okay, you sent me more, I'm going to put more in New York. They're going to say, I have enough in New York. I'm now going to throw those to El Paso, Texas. And all of a sudden, your stuff is sitting in El Paso, Texas, because they're like, that's where I have storage capacity, and I have enough in New York, I have enough in Chicago, I have enough in LA. I have enough in Seattle. I don't need more in those places. I'm going to put it in a place that, because it's now excess
Yeah, and
inventory.
it's less expensive for them just to leave it there.
Correct. And the problem then becomes, let's talk in an expiration date item scenario. Amazon doesn't do FIFO across their network. They do FIFO in the building. So what they'll end up doing is they'll say, okay, what's the correct building to ship from? And then you can ship FIFO or FIFO in this scenario, right? First expiration, first out. But they're not going to go to El Paso. So if you send in stuff that is newer after that moment, and that goes to New York and someone in New York buys, they're not going to ship it from El Paso. That's very expensive. So
Yeah.
your stuff is just going to rot in El Paso, Texas, and you have enough in the network. So it looks like you have enough in the network, but you don't have it localized. And that's where you get some of these discrepancies between, I've been sending stuff in. Why did my thing why is this expired? I sent this in a year ago or 9 months ago and it has a year expiration date. Why is this happening to me? It's probably because your inventory just got in the wrong spot. And that happens regularly if you're sending in too much inventory. So, I mean, one of the ways that we attack this is we do very frequent orders and we do very frequent replenishment into Amazon. So like on a weekly basis, we're sending, at least sometimes more frequently than that, we're sending in the same products multiple times, and we're trying to keep a lower level, right above the low inventory fee of how much that we have all of the time. That very short supply chain for us, we're stupid fast into Amazon, right? Mm-hmm. We've got the density, we've got the speed, we got the full truckloads. So we're able to do it by regularly pushing things in. People try to solve it by stuffing the channel, and it just doesn't do what you think it will do.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the way you describe it, the way to clean it up is like to get close to stocking out at one moment. Like,
yeah, it's like getting the right level of inventory, and the right level of inventory is surprisingly lower than most people think it is. You don't need 12 weeks of inventory at Amazon. Amazon doesn't want you to have 12 weeks of inventory, right? Like for many people from the lead time perspective, as their lead time has gone up, this goes a little bit higher, right?
I remember one Christmas, I don't know how long ago this was, but like there was like this like sweet spot. And if you like stayed in there, they actually gave you an incentive.
That was, I think that was 2 or 3 years ago, right? Yeah, they actually were giving like a few cents back per unit if you could stay within a range. It didn't work very well, I think, for many sellers, but I think the concept was to get the right optimal level of inventory. It's hard, Sky. Like this is hard. Like this is the point. Like they're pushing so much complexity back to the sellers, and unless you have a very reflexive and fast supply chain, this is really hard to navigate for brands and sellers. Like this is like hard MIT level stuff. This is not easy.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's so interesting how like Amazon just tries something new about every year.
Every year.
Well, COVID also kind of forced their hand to like be very creative, but like you go back years and like, the Q4 shenanigans have always just like been like slightly different, trying to like optimize things. I'll give them credit for creativity, but
agreed.
Sounds like we still have some figuring out to do. And now, so what does this look like in 2025? Let's say like Amazon's kind of figured it out. They didn't raise fees this year because they were like, well, Amazon FBA is not a loss center anymore, where it used to.
Nope.
I think early days it was like a loss leader. They just like
for sure.
And since it's not there, they're like, well, we should not make this a profit center at least.
I don't want to be I don't want to like throw too many stones at Amazon. Maybe they deserve it and it's fine. But like I saw that, I was like, well, yeah, that just means you guys are making so much money. It's insane, right? Like that kind of how it felt. Like this year was so tumultuous. It felt like there was no chance they could come back and do it for a second year without a crazy amount of outrage. And it probably just means that they're making more than they thought on some of those fees than they originally expected. And that means that you've got, they can hold off for a year and try to like, I mean, you saw like there's a lot of outrage this year on the complexity and the cost increases. A lot of brands were really struggling. So I'm happy that they didn't raise it, but I'm a little cynical about the reason.
Yeah. Do you think 2025 that, some of these placement issues will change, or like what are you guys making any further adjustments around this?
Yeah, I mean, we are here's what I expect. I expect that Amazon will solve, I mean, just like every peak, appointment times will get easier, right? Like it's
Yeah.
not peak anymore. So Amazon will solve that. I mean, even this week, I know we're recording this in December, but earlier this week, Amazon sent out something in Carrier Central that basically said our inbound network is completely screwed. We need to I think they use the phrase mass reschedule appointments, and we'll be contacting you soon. They sent that out to all the carriers that were
I saw
delivering
that.
within the
Yeah.
network, which is crazy. Like that, what an insane thing to just send out right now, right? So I think they're going to get through that period of time, right? That'll happen early in Q1.
Mhm.
They'll get through the insanity of like the peak pinch, but what they haven't solved and they're not going to solve is what I'm talking about with the national versus regional crosstalks. Like that's going to be a thing that will increase your lead times rather significantly, as well as the LTL network is not going to be solved overnight. Like what they did this year when you split, right? I used to be sending one full truckload. Now I'm sending 5 LTL instead of a full truckload. The
Mhm.
LTL network just got punched completely in the gut. And so I think they're going to have to struggle with that. I would expect some changes within the Amazon Freight network. I would expect some changes within like the partner carrier program. I'm curious to see what they end up doing with those in
Yeah.
2025 because they're just completely strung right now. It's
Well,
going to take some time to unspin
when
it.
they make a big change like this placement fees, it actually has like downfield effects. I don't even know if they knew all that. Like, it's not like,
There's
oh,
just
this
no
is going to
way.
lead to West Coast getting jammed up or LTL being
Yeah.
slower.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
AWD completely shutting down because people were using it wrong and they were using it to avoid placement fees, which I don't think they anticipated. And that AWD salespeople started selling it as, hey, avoid your placement fees, use AWD, which is exactly the wrong reason to use AWD. But it completely blew it up and they stopped taking appointments in November, right?
yeah.
Late October. I think you're 100% right. I don't think they anticipated any of those happening.
Yeah. I don't know if we have like the full time or to go all the way into AWD. I've got a
Yeah.
few other things. One, I'm not even, I don't know too much about AWD, like the specific nuances, but like you said, they kind of shut it down in November. Let's just like take a step back,
Yeah.
and I've got a few thoughts regarding, closer to your business or some of the businesses that we serve, that like, there's some ebbs and flows with like the 1P versus 3P and the accelerator's role in that. And then another thing that I'm seeing more is that gating seems to be increasing,
Hmm.
at least in some categories. So,
Yeah.
1P versus 3P, that's a debate. It's been around for 10 years. And
It just keeps
I heard about
going
a,
back and forth. Yeah. Yep.
I heard about a high affinity brand just this week that they're going to 1P. And they were getting promises. I've talked to some premium beauty brands. They're going to
Yep.
1P because they're getting some promises that they just wouldn't get
Yeah.
without it. So, and some of these do hurt resellers or
Yep.
3P, focused sellers. Uh, what's your take on how things are going?
Yeah, it's good. It's a good question, and I think it's going to be very interesting to see how Amazon continues to change their focus. I feel like they've just gone back and forth on this so many times over the past. I mean, you said it, the past decade. It's just been really interesting to watch Amazon kind of respond to where they think they need to be. I mean, Amazon continues to, at least from the spirit of what they're trying to solve is still how do we have the best pricing, the best consumer experience. And so I do think that there's some specific categories where they want to stay ultra competitive. And I think that's where it makes the most sense for like a 1P, 3P. I mean, think about the 3P model they built up is an incredible opportunity. You said like FBA is, I'm an evangelist as well. FBA is 99+% of the stuff that we do, right? Like for the vast majority of products and experience for customers, they built up this incredible option for people to do in the 3P space, right? So they've built up like this FBA option that is incredible. So why would Amazon want to take on inventory risk? Right? That's kind of where this always comes back. Like if you have this machine and people don't actually care if it ships and sold by Amazon anymore, then like why would you go 1P? Why would you want to keep doing that? And I really think that it is for, I mean, they could be wrong or they could be right, but I think the driving force behind this regularly is the customer experience in a few specific categories. I think if you were to ask, like, I mean, just think about this in, let's say, electronics. Amazon wants to be able to say on Black Friday, I want to match what is in Best Buy. I want to match what's in Target. I want to match what's in, and they don't get that ability, right? If they have, if it's a 3P. So I think from an Amazon perspective, that there's some control there that they'd like to have just to protect the consumer.
The tip of the spear on that is actually Apple, as it's been maybe a year and a half where they've like really like actually partnered up together, and you've seen Apple products. Now they're able to have Apple products lead these deal days. And
which is so, it's different. It's a different strategy for Apple. It's a different strategy for Amazon. But I think that is the driving force between stuff like premium beauty, where it's like, okay, this is a different type of experience for a consumer. So I think the intent around Amazon, where they will take on the inventory risk, is not as much about margin. It's not as much about growth. It's actually, I think, pretty foundationally about how do we make sure that we have the best customer experience, that we stay competitive on these big deal days.
When it comes to counterfeit and expiration dates, beauty is a target of that.
Absolutely.
And, then there's also a conversation, Amazon could just be like talking to their own book where they're making money right now. They're like, hey, if we do this, all of a sudden this brand will invest in ads. And maybe.
I mean, but look at 3P space. I mean, like we spend, I don't even know how much money on ads every single year. I mean, like, it's not like the good resellers, the good sellers in general, not just resell, the good sellers, and that's brands, that's whatever, have a robust ad strategy. And Amazon has the best direct line from spend to conversion in the world. I mean, like it's very easy to see that, right? It's very hard to get anything that compete with, I put in $1 and I get X out on the other side. I think that is probably not 100% false, but I think it's probably less of a motivator than people think.
Well,
people spend money on ads on Amazon.
Maybe not ads, but just like overall, like their attention.
I think that might be right, but like, there's also like Amazon doesn't want everything to be 1P either, right? Like they don't want to build the infrastructure. They can't have retail managers. They can't do all of the, all the stuff that needs to happen. So I don't think Amazon's against 3P. Obviously, they want that thing to exist. I think the driving force is not, I think it's just competition, right? It's like, how do we make sure that we're creating an environment that is able to compete with other retail marketplaces that they find themselves around?
If you would have talked to me in 2019, there really wasn't a lot of great competition to Amazon. It's kind of crazy how like 5 years later, it's the first time, and they're bigger than ever, but still you're like, okay, there could be some existential threats.
I think that's right. I mean, e-commerce is still pretty young. Like this is a thing that people don't really think about. I actually was just talking, I don't even know if this is a good thing to talk about, but today I was talking to somebody about, do you remember that Kmart commercial? Like you ship your pants?
Yeah.
Like I just shipped my pants. It's like, if you haven't seen it, I'm not crazy. Look it up. It's on YouTube.
No, I've seen it.
Yeah. So like I was talking to somebody today and I was like, I think that commercial's like, I don't know, from like 2011 or 12 or something like that. And they were like, no, it has to be way earlier than that. This is like, early e-commerce or whatever. And I was like, right. I think it was like 10 years ago. And it was in 2013. But that commercial in my mind, like that's not that long ago, that basically Kmart was like, first of all, still around. And second of all, was like, this is the introduction of e-commerce. Like you can ship things to your house and buy it from us. That's not that long ago. We're still very young in this process of figuring this out. And I think you're right. Like Amazon and the rest of the competitors are still figuring out how they want to compete, how they do compete, and if they want to go play the games around the e-commerce world that they were, some of these big retailers, right? I mean, you've seen, look at Walmart in the last 5 years. Like their e-commerce strategy has completely changed in 5 years. So I think we're still just so young and people don't really realize that.
Yeah. And this has been my opinion. Like COVID made every e-commerce effort like work, even the bad ideas. They're like, well, during 2020, like it worked. So
all boats rose, right? Yes.
And so as much as it helped Amazon, it may have helped their competition a little bit more.
I mean, I think that's probably right. I mean, to come back to the 1P, 3P thing, I don't think 1P is going to dry up tomorrow, right? I think there's still a
No.
place for it. I think Amazon still finds it strategic in scenarios.
Well,
I think
they
they'll
hold
continue to
on
look for
to
opportunities not to though too.
they hold on to what I've been heard as like high affinity brands.
Yep.
Um, and they're always going to chase them because like
Yeah,
there are A-list brands. You know, we talked about Apple
for sure.
already. Like they're just going to be A-list forever.
Yeah.
And um, and it's so much so that Amazon just like wants to like make sure they're like top of mind.
And there's some things where, I mean, you know this better than most probably. Like you've got this scenario where a lot of lower priced items, you can't sell FBA. You just can't do that. Like
Yeah.
the pricing doesn't work. And so you end up getting in a situation where, like, would Amazon not want you to type in Colgate toothpaste and have it come up like, because nobody could ever sell a tube of Colgate toothpaste by itself? No, they want you to be able to buy Colgate toothpaste on Amazon because you can buy a bunch of other stuff, right? So I think you're right that you have to kind of play this balance between what inventory risk they want to take on, but also having Amazon continue to be the place to come for brands,
Mhm.
or I'm sorry, for customers.
Well, so you've been with Pattern for 2 years now. How is
Yep.
it?
It's been really cool. I was at Amazon for 8 years, and then I joined a very small startup called Whitebox. Really cool opportunity. I was there for 4 years. So I was in like the, like 10 people startup. I was in the trillion people Amazon. And Pattern has been a really cool opportunity to, we just have a ton of very smart people here. I actually believe what we're trying to do is really fun. Like being able to directly partner with brands
Mm-hmm.
and be able to do so much for them. Like this is hard. What we are talking
Mm-hmm.
about here is very challenging, right? So like the
Yeah.
accelerator space is pretty fun because it's not just transactional, right? We get to do partnership. We really have a cultural piece
Well,
that
you
has
have
been
skin
pretty
in the
fun.
game.
Yeah, absolutely, right? And
Um,
so it's not it is far more relationship focused and partnership focused than I think I even really anticipated coming in. So that's been a really cool. And also, to be honest and transparent, we've had a couple really good years. It's been a challenging retail environment over the last couple of years, and
mhm.
we've done really, really well. We've grown fast. I've been able to, you
Yeah.
know, help build the core business. We launched a 3PL. We're doing stuff like Middle Mile, which you and I have talked about before. We're selling transportation space and partnering with other brands. It's been a
I've
really cool experience.
we as we're just a data service provider, have had the chance to like work alongside Pattern. And what I won't even go into details, like I wouldn't do that, but like what I see from Pattern is a sophistication in like working with brands, specifically like even just building the relationship before like uh then like wow, haven't seen that before. um like just like the overall marketing effects. Here's an example that I saw yesterday. Um, there's very few ultra. This leads us into Amazon. Sorry, to SEO, Google SEO space.
Yeah.
Um, I actually can rank on 90% of Amazon terms. There's a few, and I'm like, oh, this is tough. And I'm not all right at SEO. I'm not great. And I just typed in 1P versus 3P, and I saw a pattern there as number one. And I messaged a guy from that. I was like, hey, congrats on this. Like, this is not, this is actually like, you have to like work to get this spot.
Hard. Yeah.
Um, and so, it's funny, like, like there's some sophistication in what you guys are doing. You said you're some of your smart coworkers, and I can attest to it. I've seen some of the strategies, and I'm like, dang, wish I would have thought of that.
Yeah. Oh, I think what's fun too, I think it's there's there's been a lot of companies over the past 5 years in this space that I think promise a lot, and there's not a lot underlying that
Mhm.
thing because you have to be world class at
Yeah.
everything. You have to be world class at listing management. You have to be world class at ads. You have to be world class in logistics, or none of that matters, right? You got to be in stock. You got to have the right level of stock. You got to be able to get it in cheaply. You got to be able to do it the right way. How do you possibly be great at all of those things as a brand? And what's cool is what Dave and what our leadership team brought in. we have like world-class people and teams focused on each individual thing. And it's been really fun to work with just like incredible talent across the board. And that allows us underneath to be like, to walk the walk, right? Like we actually do execute, which has been really fun. And like, not everything's perfect, right? It's not all sunshine and rainbows. It's like stuff happens and it breaks. And when it breaks, we're faster to respond. And, so it's been really quite satisfying to be part of the growth.
Yeah, no, I think Pattern's a great example of like, there's like the startups, the small, smaller than 50 people shops. That's where I've spent most of my career. You guys are very much like kind of like that middle, like, still nimble enough to like, I don't know, launch a conference off of an idea, but still like, bigger where you can like, I don't know, really have disciplined people across many different disciplines. Sorry, capable people across many different disciplines. Well, that's cool. And Rob, this has been longer than I usually have podcasts, and I know that we could have gone on longer.
Probably, yeah.
But thanks for coming on. If people want to reach out to you, they got questions about some logistics or this or that, what's a good way to reach out?
Yeah. So, I mean, on our website, so we've got a couple different services, right? We actually, like I said, we're selling 3PL. We do D2C fulfillment. We can get your stuff into Amazon for you faster and combine it with our stuff to get transportation in. We can actually create shipments for you and do it all, automated through our hardware and software. All that, like if you go to pattern.com, you can go through logistics. You can get to our other areas where you can see what offerings we have from like a 3PL space. If you're a brand that is interested, you can also get someone to reach out to you through pattern.com. It's a great way. It's kind of a repository for both like our core model, if you will, where we buy and sell inventory, or like services where we'll, ship stuff in around the world. So pattern.com is a great place to start. There's a, contact me kind of situation, and we jump on. It's a very low pressure sales. It's generally a lot of education, which I love our sales approach in general. So reach out that way and we can link you up with the right people, but that's the best way in.
Well, Rob, always a pleasure. Thanks for, highlighting some of the changes. We will wrap up there. Excited to see what 2025 brings. Hopefully it's, we step away from complexity and into, productivity. We'll call it that.
Yeah, that's the hope. And I'll look forward to hearing you at Accelerate. Hopefully you don't screw up and, embarrass us.
I won't. So. I'm just going to tell stories. It's just way easier. If you try and spend so much time trying to be smart, you know what? Yep. You're probably going to fail, but just
talk stories about stuff that's happened. Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks, Rob. All right.
Thanks, you.
Everyone. We'll see you.
1, 2, 3.